Let's take a look at the structure of a typical nephron. The nephron is the structure in yellow on the screen, and we'll just use a picture from our book. And before we look at the nephron, let me give context to where this is located in the kidney. These blood vessels that we see running in a horizontal plane, those are the arcuate arteries and veins. And we can see that the nephron has its own blood supply. And so we're going to take a look at blood supply in a different video. But for right now, all I would like to make the point of is the arcuate arteries are right at the base of the renal pyramids, which means that if those arteries are running there, then anything below that point would be the renal medulla, and anything above that point is the renal cortex. So we can see that a lot of the nephron is located in the renal cortex, and just, part of it is dipping into the renal medulla. So the nephron has two basic regions. One region is called the renal corpuscle, and the renal corpuscle is made up of the blood supply, the capillary bed that services the nephron. That's called the glomerulus. And the glomerulus is surrounded by part of the nephron called Bowman's capsule. And so together, the blood supply of the glomerulus, surrounded by Bowman's capsule, part of the nephron, makes up what's called the renal corpuscle. The renal corpuscle is where filtration takes place. The rest of the nephron is what's known as the renal tubule. And the renal tubule is literally just a hollow tube that extends away from Bowman's capsule. The renal tubule is where the filtrate that exits the blood gets processed and turned into urine. The renal tubule is made up of the proximal convoluted tubule. That's the portion that's closest to Bowman's capsule. That leads into the loop of Henle. The loop of Henle leads into the distal convoluted tubule. And then the distal convoluted tubule plugs into something called a collecting duct. And as you can see here, the collecting duct collects urine being produced from many different nephrons. Let's use a different model to take a closer look at the renal corpuscle. Blood is brought in to the glomerulus through the afferent arteriole, shaded green here. The tangled capillary bed contained within Bowman's capsule is called the glomerulus. After blood flows through the glomerulus, it exits through the efferent arteriole. The other part of the renal corpuscle is Bowman's capsule. So let's take a look at the two layers of Bowman's capsule. The yellow layer of Bowman's capsule is the visceral layer of Bowman's capsule. It's in contact with the glomerulus, and it's also continuous with the outer parietal layer of Bowman's capsule, seen in green here. The space in between the yellow and the green layers, the visceral and parietal layers of Bowman's capsule, is the capsular space. Let's take a closer look at the visceral layer of Bowman's capsule. That's made up of these specialized cells called podocytes. They're called podocytes because they have these foot-like extensions that come off of the cell and wrap around the glomerulus. And then coming off of these extensions are these little fringe-like extensions called pedicels. What this does is it creates a loosely woven cellular layer that leaves gaps in between these areas called filtration slits. This is going to allow filtrate to leave the blood and enter into Bowman's capsule. Let's finish up by using a different model to take a closer look at the renal tubule. The portion of the renal tubule shaded green here is the proximal convoluted tubule. That's the part that's closest to Bowman's capsule. Taking a closer look at the cells that make up the proximal convoluted tubule, we can see microvilli extending into the hollow lumen. This is because this area of the tubule is actively reabsorbing some of the filtrate and putting it back into the blood. Once filtrate leaves the proximal convoluted tubule, it enters into the U-shaped loop of Henle. The distalmost part of the renal tubule is the distal convoluted tubule. The distal convoluted tubule empties the forming urine into the collecting duct. A collecting duct is a duct that gathers forming urine from many nephrons. It travels down the renal pyramid to the renal papilla, where it merges with other collecting ducts as a bigger papillary duct. This is where urine exits the renal pyramid and enters into the minor calyx.